Have you ever picked out the perfect spot that you wanted to have your home, only to find out that your power system just doesn't quite fit, or it's a little too far away for you to stretch a bunch of cables all the way down to where you're actually working on things? Not to worry, there is now such a mod called Flux Networks, made by Ali Lanzel, who actually is the same maker of such mods as Calculator Mod, which this is a mod that was inspired from that. In fact, kind of an early version was kind of brought from that and developed into what we have now, which gives you a really strong wireless power network that you can use to your advantage. And I'll be covering how this best can work for you in your own modded playthrough. And for those that have made this possible, I would like to thank today Mad Gnome for supporting the Mischief on our Patreon. Thank you once again, Mad Gnome. And to get things started, there's plenty that can be learned from this mod. It is very basic in actually how it functions, but it can be used in many complex ways. I'll be showing you a little bit on the recipes, how it functions intermixably, I guess, and well, how it doesn't function in other ways. But let's start with the basics, how you can start making this stuff. Of course, you're going to need this, which is flux. How do you get flux? Basically, you take redstone and you either throw it on lava, or you can throw it in burning fire, or due to the configs, on a rare occasion, you might get some to drop from redstone ore when you're mining it, and it will turn into flux. So if I get some redstone, and then I end up opening this here, I have some lava in there as an example. Let's just throw a bunch in, and it instantly turns into flux. Not a problem. There we go. And that's probably the most traditional method for basically obtaining flux. Now, that is only one ingredient. It's actually not like a placeable item. You don't put it down on the ground or anything like that. It's just a crafting ingredient, so it's not going to be much other use. But you're going to need a lot of it in order to get into this mod and allow it to basically power every part of your setup. So next, you're going to want to start crafting flux cores. Flux cores are made basically in this manner here, which when you translate it into its most basic components is more or less 4 obsidian, 4 redstone, a blaze powder, and a ender pearl. And I'm showing you this because these things are going to start getting exponentially higher with how much more involved you want to get in this mod. Now, something else you're going to want is this here. This is going to be a flux block. And I did neglect to mention that this here, your flux core, is also a crafting recipe. It doesn't do anything short of just be a crafting ingredient. Now, this, on the other hand, a flux block, is placeable. So you can place it down on the ground and you can use it as such, but it is primarily used as another crafting ingredient, which of course will use 4 of those flux cores, which you make 4 from the previous recipe, plus 5 more flux. So it's a very similar recipe. It's the same as the previous one, just 5 more redstone. Now you'll see here where we're starting to go with these next ones. You can basically get into this mod with just a couple of these. And these are flux plugs and flux points. Flux plugs are used to store power or pull power from a power generating source. In this case, I've got some solar panels out there with flux plugs dotted around them, as you can see here. And these are crafted with a few flux cores and a flux block. Now you see why I was demonstrating how these were made, which equates to about this much per recipe. And that just makes you 1 flux plug. And that's just an input. So therefore, you've got the input, not a problem. Now you need to have multiple outputs, most likely, because you're going to be running multiple machines in a lot of cases. And that's where a flux point comes in, which is made with 4 flux cores and a block of redstone. So it's a similar investment in materials, but a little bit less than the blaze powder and blaze pearls, thankfully, because that is probably going to be a little bit more often used. Now, these, of course, can be used as they are. If I were to grab one here, and take a flux plug and place it down. You can see it is kind of like white edged. These other ones have all sorts of different colors on them. Those are the colors of the network available. If I were to also grab a flux point, then this will help me to demonstrate how this might work. I spawned in just now a basic capacitor bank from Ender.io, a relatively well-known mod. If I put this down over here, you can see that it currently has no power in it or anything like that. And I have a flux point. Of course, a flux plug will draw power from something. Flux point will insert power into something. And just by having it near something, it will automatically start basically placing these as, they will automatically connect if they are available to. But that doesn't mean that they're actually doing anything. As you can see, the power is still 0. Nothing is happening here. And it is currently daytime, even though it's quickly receding. There we go. I just refreshed the day. And therefore, this here, when you right-click on it, goes into this crazy-looking menu. And it looks a bit complex, but it's actually much simpler than you might think. So on your home here, when you're first starting this up, you can actually change the name of this plug if you want. You can set it to a priority so that it gets a higher it's actually used before other plugs are. You can reduce its transfer limit or just keep it at its maximum, which is what it's set at by default. It tells you the input amount that is happening and that it's connected to a solar panel. In this case, a solar panel 4 from another Flux mod, and which is I think Solar Flux Reborn. You can also continue on, go through the different networks that are created. In this case, you can select one off the list, but we're not. We're going to actually make our own in this case, which is create a new network. We're going to keep it with Valen Frostweaver's network. It kind of cuts off the beginning and the end there, but you'll see. You can change it to private or restricted or public. And by restricted, you can actually allow other people access to it if they're on your allowed players list, which then you'd type someone in here, then add plus. And then when you come back to that screen, they should be on there, but you have to have created a network first. I just realized I did not create one. So in this case, Forge Energy should be accepting and receiving in just about all sorts of different energy types. You can change it to whatever you like. It goes through quite a bit, and there's highly configurable options in the configs if you wanted to change it. You can also change the color that you want this to be. Just by clicking on here, you can go through the presets, or you can change it to different brighter colors if you really wanted to. In this case, let's make it bright pink, and it's Valen Frostweaver's network, create. There we go. You can see it's down at the bottom, and now we can choose it. Ta-da! And when we hit escape to back out, it is now bright pink. So my network currently is hooked up, and it's receiving energy, but it has nowhere to go. So we need to actually set that up. At this point, like I said before, you can allow players, besides myself, as you can see here, config, network owner, right-click to change. You could feasibly change that to something else, but as you're the owner, it doesn't really change. But if I add someone else, like Kashka here, add her, and then I can right-click. She's a user of the system, she's blocked from the system, she's a shared owner of the system, and so on. And you can also remove them if you so desired. This is what would allow you to basically edit the network and allow it to be restricted and so on. So you do have some options with that as well. There is a debug menu as well, which I actually do appreciate. If you have some kind of connectivity issues you're unsure of, you can always reconnect all the blocks attached to Flux plugs and points, and you can always check all Flux connections, and it removes duplicates or errored tiles that might be in the case of like if you had a crash and you had to delete something nearby, whatever. It's just a little helpful tool. Now you can see that it still currently says 0 is currently being transferred. That's expected. Network connections, here's the Flux plug. It's in place, and there's tons of little buttons at the bottom. Well, before I get too farther away, because I am getting a little bit carried away with this, we want to connect this to another system. Now over here, I have, as before, a Flux point, which pushes power out into something. Basically, you just right-click on it, select a network. We're going to choose one we just created, and then back out, and it now starts inputting power at 1,000 per tick. There we go. It's that simple. That's really how easy it can be. Now, you can't really store a lot on here because you don't have anything set up for that, like these here, Flux storage, or using a Flux Controller to further refine your network or your, basically allow you to access wireless abilities, further wireless abilities, at least as far as charging goes. But you can see that this works just fine. It's great, right? I can actually make another Flux point here and have that one be the same network. I could have one over here and it'd be a different network if I wanted to. and they could all be feeding into this, and so on. It's great. You can also have multiple capacitors, or rather, here we go, Ender IO capacitors being connected at once. Now, usually these will only start flowing power in and out one at a time. Now, actually, they will accept power from multiple sources at once. But it usually will only, in the case of like something like this solar panel, will only output power to one unit attached to it. So if you have several attached to it, it'll only go into one of them. And that might just be the way that mod is set up, not the one that Flux Networks is set up. This, on the other hand, when you output, will only output to one at a time. So you're going to want to make sure that you kind of have things powered as needed. Now, once one is full, it will then go to the next one. So it will alternate between them if they are constantly using a small amount of power and it's got a lot that it can split off. So, what else will I need? Most likely, you're probably going to want to get yourself some kind of storage. Now, that one's a bit large. I have plenty of storage out here. Let me put these back away on these points here. These here are all different kinds of storage. These are basic ones. Each one is hooked up to a different network, and it changes the color according to the network that you set it as. Like I showed you before, you can actually change the colors. And you can see this one is like partially full and still filling up and so on. This one doesn't have any. This one isn't even connected to a network. And this here is a Flux Controller. But before we get into the controllers, let's continue on with the storage. This is an unclaimed network, and it's basically a, well, basic Flux storage. This is the most basic battery that you can place down. That's all this is. It stores power. It allows you a buffer of sorts to do so. Then it goes up to a Herculean, and then it goes up to a Gargantuan. Now, this one here will store a maximum of 256,000 power. I'm not going to say what type because it varies. And then this one here will do 12.8 million. So that's quite a lot. And then this one here goes 128 million. So they jump up considerably, but their costs also go up just as much. Now this one here, this is how much it costs in materials to make one basic Flux storage. That's quite a lot. And as you can see, it's almost a stack of obsidian. And of course, you've had to have killed several Endermen and had some blaze powder. But the recipe for it is a whole bunch of flux blocks and 2 glass panes, which doesn't look very good, but this is why I wanted to show you. It's a little deceiving, especially when you get into the next one. Herculean, that one there is made of 6 basic flux storages plus 2 glass panes. We'll make a Herculean, which is all this. 36 blocks of redstone. You've got 5 and a little bit of stacks of obsidian, 14 glass panes, several stacks of ender pearls, and so on. We'll get you one of those. and if you weren't already prepared, hold on to your hat, because the Herculean, or the Gargantuan rather, because that one was the Herculean over there, is all this in redstone, and then 30 stacks plus 24 obsidian. Then all these ender pearls, all this blaze powder, and these glass panes will make you one Gargantuan flux storage, which is it's gargantuan. It's a lot, as the name would imply. So, yeah, that's just the batteries. You can mix and match these. They don't need to be connected to anything. They exist separate. As you can see here, this is on a green network. There's nothing connected to it. I mean, I have a Flux Controller sitting next to it, but it doesn't have to be. And it will just take the power in to the green, feed it into the Gargantuan flux storage. And you're not seeing it move because it's a Gargantuan one. It will take a bit. This one here is at, what, 55.6? So if I click on it, you can see 55.7, and eventually it'll get to 55.8 because it's very slowly gaining power from that one solar panel, which is just gaining power over time. But it just goes into the network, and then this would feed out into perhaps one of these, like a little flux point. I could change the network on this one and have it start going out into that if I so desired. Now, just so that you're aware, you can't really pull power out of these batteries. They are only compatible with the flux points, or at least in my testing. I could be mistaken on that. Things may change in the future, but it does make it so that you're going to want to use flux points instead of like power conduits, because in this case, I have this extracting, which it's always active, power, using these energy conduits. This is also extracting, just in case you had a doubt that it was like on a side or the top or something, in the same manner. Going into this, inserting into a basic capacitor, and there's nothing there. Now, in order for it to actually function, I would need to put down a flux point. Let's grab this one. We'll put this here. That one is going to the wrong system. We're going to do green. There we go. And it is now getting power, as you can see. So that's kind of a restriction on it, but at least it does give you an option for storing things. But it's all wireless. There's no cables involved, etc. So, Flux Controller, what good is it? It gives you options for wireless charging is its strongest point. Now, there were other things that I did not cover on some of the other menus, but the thing that really adds this in is this menu for this, the Flux Controller itself. Now, let's actually go take a look real quick at grabbing one of these. Recipe for it is just 5 flux blocks, a couple of flux, and a flux core, which is actually rather similar to a basic flux storage cost. And you don't have to have one, but it's not a bad idea to have one, especially if you have wireless items. Now, wireless charging, it says disabled. You can just click that and it will enable it. It's that simple. If you wanted to see more, you can then configure wireless charging here by clicking on this. And this looks a little bit confusing. It's like, what is this? This is actually your inventory system. Right here is your armor inventory, your bauble slots, player inventory, your hotbar, your left hand, and your right hand. So you can actually do all this or limit it so that it's none, or just your left hand, or just your right hand will charge things. So if I wanted to do so, I could. Let me grab, here we go, a Lux Saber from Extra Utilities 2. That's great. So in here, I have it set up for my right hand. So if I put this in my right hand, it should feasibly start charging. If it's enabled. There we go. And you can see now it is fully charging this Lux Saber in no time flat. There we go. I can now zap things and kill them very easily. Or I could feasibly have the entire inventory completely charging. Or I could just have it set to certain areas. Only my armor gets charged and so on. It's really nice how this can really offer a lot for what you have available. Now, if I were to continue on, yes, you've got different networks. You can delete the networks if you want, if you have power to do so. If it's someone else's network, then obviously you're probably not going to do that. But if you go with the network connections, this is really useful. It shows you all the different connections you might have. Different plugs, different points, basic storage, gargantuan storage, the controller. And if you click on one, that just means you've selected it, and then you can use it with all the different options below if you so desire. Now in this case, you can sort differently. You can sort by priority if you have designated any. I haven't in this case. You can show the connected blocks, which, there we go. You can now see the solar panels on here. You can clear the filter settings if you have any set up. Connected tiles or disconnect from the network. So I could actually disconnect a flux plug. In this case, I think it's that one, I believe, from the network by doing so. So let's actually click here and disconnect that from the network. And you can see now it has turned white and has stopped gaining power from the different solar panels. So it is networkless in this case. So that is how this kind of works. Now, here's the thing. It does give chunk loading. It's kind of on by default. I do not find any way to shut this off in other methods, but it will show you if things are chunk loaded and unloaded. This is both. If I choose this, it shows everything that causes chunk loading, which is every one of these items. Now, if I choose this, anything that is unloaded, it doesn't have anything listed. So just keep that in mind. This is a chunk loading tool as well. Now, showing plugs, you can just remove those. You can remove the points. You can remove the storages. You can even remove the controllers individually or separate as you desire. It's a really intuitive, nice thing. I really like how it is. And then if you go over to the statistics, you can see how things are actually going. Let's reselect the network for this one, bring it back online, and then you can see with here, we currently have an input of 3.1 kF forge energy per tick coming in. And then you can see other stats as appropriate. Something else I neglected to mention is that if this basic capacitor bank is, charged up, you can hook it up to one of the flux points via a energy conduit if that will actually help you out. And then that would allow it to actually start charging, as you can see here. It is now charging from this flux point. Also, you should know that if you access the flux plugs or flux points, you can always access a little bit more variety with changing it from always active, never active, active with redstone, and active without redstone, of course, as appropriate. You can change the priority to normal or surge. I'm not actually quite sure on that one what it is, but I think that it more or less would allow a brief amount to transfer through. And then, of course, you can enable the limit or remove it altogether and just let it go at its maximum speed, which is going to be 256,000 in this case. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this bit by bit on Flux Networks. It's a really handy, nice wireless mod. It does have a lot of cost to it, but it is highly configurable as well. So, feel free to give a like, comment, subscribe, and as always, be sure to spread the mischief to others if you think that they'll enjoy this kind of content too. And until next time, folks, I'll see ya.